Before we get started, you can always access my calendar in the show notes to set up a time to talk. On with the show.
Welcome to Blending the Family, the podcast. Topics can range from finding your faith, dating after divorce, and mental health. Here's your host, who was told by a guest that he was a podcast influencer. Well, you know the truth about that statement. Tommy Maloney.
Welcome to the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. How are you doing? You doing good? You quarantined? Are you ready to strangle your loved ones as you're all under one satanic roof right now? You're homeschooling maybe. Maybe you and your spouse are both working from home. Luckily for my wife Anne, she is an essential employee, so she gets to go into work, and she's happy about that because she doesn't think she would like working from home with me being home. I really predict that she'd be one of those people that would probably want to strangle their spouse just after, I wouldn't even say 3 days, I would probably say 3 hours. Whew. You doing good? I hope you're doing good. I hope you're still working on yourself. Maybe you're taking some online courses just to change up the day. Are you going for walks? Are you going for runs? Are you using a lot of the streaming exercise programs right now? My wife Anne has been using some yoga, doing that, and she says she's been enjoying that. Me, I just want to go outside and go for a walk. Went for a walk yesterday, and I realized that I didn't eat enough, and I was halfway back home when I realized I really needed more fuel in me. So I've decided I'm going to put a little bit more breakfast into me, and then later in the afternoon when I go for my walk, I should be good. I should be good to go. All right, on this episode of Blending the Family, we have Taj Dashaun on this episode. He is the founder of Thrive After Sports, and I really wanted to get Taj on this podcast because as a parent, as a lot of you out there who have young athletes whose sports have come to a screeching halt due to the way the world is right now, I wanted Taj to come on this podcast and talk about how we parents can help our kids get through the effects of not being able to do their sports. Also, if you have seniors in high school and it's that time and visiting schools, and I wanted Taj to talk about what are some really good ways to make sure that we parents are engaged to help our kids get through the recruiting process, but also visiting schools as well. And he has a really interesting story about how he went from being a high school athlete to college, and then after college, nothing. He didn't know what to do. And so, like I said, I'm really excited to share this episode with you. Again, Taj's business, Thrive After Sports. We cover a lot. Like I said, we talk about, how young athletes can handle the process of just looking for schools and universities, things like that. Whew. Wow. It's been interesting. I've been more busy being home in a good way, in a creative way. And I'm so blessed that you've decided to listen to this podcast and share it and let others know about it. So thank you. It's just I'm actually happy. I don't know what it is. I've been happier as of late, and I think that's part of it is just being home, not having the dreaded day job as far as traveling, and taking full advantage of being home. I'm attempting to be a better cook. How about you? have you been experimenting with some recipes? I made over the weekend. I made some pork chops that turned out to be not bad. Um, I enjoy cooking. I'm just not really good at it. My wife Ann is really good at it, so I like to take that off her shoulders. So when she comes home, that dinner is ready to go. I made pasta last night. And you can't really screw up pasta. I know, but I made pesto pasta with shrimp. Bonus daughter Becca was home. She doesn't like pesto, so I took half the noodles and infused it with the butter and garlic and the shrimp so she can have butter noodles. But again, I enjoy cooking. I was a little stressed yesterday just trying to make dinner and just make it palpable. I'm always nervous that when my wife comes home, oh, it smells great, but let's get to the taste part. And if it tastes horrible, then I feel really bad. And then it's like, well, let's open, let's go grab something so we can have dinner. All right. I think I've covered what I really want to cover. Just happy. I don't know what it is. It's weird. Taj Dashaun, you'll find him on LinkedIn. You'll find that information in the show notes. Thrive after sports, and I hope you find the benefit of this episode. Please share it. Please leave a rating and review. Really, really appreciate those that do leave ratings and reviews. There you go. All right. I think we're at that part where we talk about Terry Crews. And so, if this is your first time listening, I always like to end the show with a quote I heard years ago in an interview with Terry Crews. And that quote is, "Your success is my success." Yeah, I have to say it. Now go wash your hands.
Warning, you're about to listen to a conversation. Please take a seat, don't drive, and make sure your eyes are on the things they're supposed to be on. Yeah, you look up.
But I'm glad we're on here too. I've been looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm just super excited that we were able to do this. And you know, by the way, I hit the record button, so I'm
Okay.
letting you know. I think this is really good timing, uh, because of what is transpiring in the world right now, and this is why I'm very happy, even though we weren't able to connect right away and earlier. I think this is serendipitous as far as timing goes because with your background, I think this is a perfect time for you to be on the podcast.
I agree. I'm one of those people that believes that everything happens for a reason. So I think we're meant to be recording on this very day at this time. So
I agree. So let's talk. Let's talk about your background first. I'm from what I've seen, you were a pretty good athlete in the physical sense. How's that?
physical sense, I like it. I'll take that. I'll take that. Yeah, I started playing football when I was around 10 years old, 10 or 11, I think, kind of in that in between, and fell in love with the game. I mean, I had been playing some sports before that, but football was like I knew it right away. It's one of those things, And then had a pretty good, high school career right off the gate. Was moved up to varsity my freshman year. Started getting some interest. I think I was a little bit of a late bloomer because I really didn't master my craft or really start getting attention from schools until my senior year, which kind of missed the window a little bit as far as recruiting the junior year, even though I did get some attention then. But anyway, based on the options that I had coming out of high school, I ended up going to Stony Brook University, which is out in Long Island, New York. I think you were recently in Long Island, weren't you? I was listening to one of your podcasts recently.
Oh, that was you that listened to that podcast. Well, thank you. Yes, yes, I was in Long Island. I can't. I do a really bad New York accent. My wife is from New York, so she just looks at me when I try to break into a New York accent. She just goes, "Stop, stop." So yeah, I was recently in Long Island, New York,
That's good.
enjoying. No, I wasn't enjoying anything there. There was not a lot there. Um, before you keep going about Stony Brook, I want to ask you what was it, Tej, about football? Why was that so your passion? What was it?
Um, I guess the physicality of it, I have to say, I think I was kind of a hyper kid. So, I played basketball, played soccer, never got into baseball, but I played basketball, played soccer kind of growing up. And then I think and I was pretty fast too. So, I was always fast when I was playing soccer and had good breakaway speed, even though I only played 1 year of basketball. But I think just the speed of football and being able to be physical, because, I was just a wild kid. I had a lot of energy, and my brother and I used to wrestle and stuff all the time. So I don't know. I think that's honestly what it was. Like, wow, I can hit people and not get in trouble for it. You know what I mean?
That's why my passion is hockey, because a little bit of that same mentality is you could hit somebody and get away with it, and then after the game you're shaking hands with them and having a beer afterwards.
Exactly. It's all love afterwards. After we just beat each
Yeah.
other up for a few hours.
So we get to Stony Brook,
Mhm.
and then what happens?
Well, I guess I should take it back a little bit because I wasn't. I think because I was, and this is probably good for all your listeners with high school students, high school athletes. Once we get into that in a little bit, which I'm sure we
Yeah.
will. But in high school, when you're the best player on your team or one of the best players on your team, we had a few guys go play D1 football on my team. But as one of the best players, you're used to kind of being the man or, being the woman or whatever and living in that bubble where you're just the best. And then a lot of times once you get to college, everybody, of course, on their team was the best player in their area or in their city or at their school.
Right, right.
So another thing I experienced, just to be completely transparent for all the parents of high school, kids out there or people in high school listening, um, it goes very quickly. Like how a lot of times how coaches treat you in the recruiting process is totally different from once you're actually there on the team, right? Then there's no more trying to make mom and dad feel good about your future. There's no more trying to sell you on the program or sell you on the school. It's all right. We got you here. Now it's time to get to work. Um, so it was a rough transition for me because number one, I grew up in Southern California, so I kind of never really left that area. I was just used to that, and then obviously being on the other side of the country in Long Island, as we say, it was a little bit of a culture shock for me at first, just because it was that combined with I had never been that far away from my folks for that long, and then the coaches who were kind of recruiting me and showing me love during the recruiting process switched up and were now screaming in my face and all this kind of stuff once I was on the field. So I was in shock, to be honest with you, at first. Um, but just to speed it up a little bit, yeah.
Why did you choose going to the East Coast?
Well, like I said, Tommy, I was kind of a late bloomer, so I didn't have too many offers going into my senior year. I did have a few of them. Like, I don't want to name the schools and throw them under the bus. I had a few higher tier D1 schools. It's just that whether it was location or I took a visit to the school and wasn't kind of really feeling the environment or the coaching staff. One of them happened to be a military school. I'll just say it. One of them was Air Force.
Oh
So,
wow,
so
Colorado Springs.
absolutely, yeah. Just I think the whole military environment wasn't something that I was interested in, to be honest with you, at the time at least. So didn't want to go to Air Force. And then the other schools, which I won't name, I took a visit to those areas, and they were in certain parts of the country where I was just like, nah, I can't see myself here. I would take visits out there with my family and all that, and kind of all of us collectively agreed this isn't necessarily where I envision myself being. And then it was interesting because I was trying to choose between these handful of schools. It was like 5 offers at the time, Air Force included. And then Stony Brook came in kind of last minute because I hadn't committed anywhere. And then so, that's when some of the smaller schools come in. And Stony Brook is still D1, but, it's a smaller tier D1 school, D1 AA. So some more like D1 AA schools started coming in and some D2 schools started coming in. And my thought process was, okay, I took a visit first of all and fell in love with it. Not necessarily Long Island, but spending time in New York City. And you'd probably know this. There's a train station on campus at Stony Brook, and it's only really like a 45-minute train ride to get into New York City. So
Right.
my family and I really like that, and I enjoyed being out there for that aspect of it. And then I really, honestly, I guess being cocky back then, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm being recruited by these bigger schools, or I could kind of go to this smaller D1 program and be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. Was my thought process at the time. Um, and that didn't end up being the case. But yeah, to answer your question, that's how I ended up going to Stony Brook.
Can you talk about, because I'm possibly going to be going through a little bit of what you're talking about as far as campus visits. My son, who's currently a junior in high school, is talking about a college. What can you recommend to parents as far as what we should be looking at when we are making these visits? And yeah, as a parent, Taj, we want to be thinking academics. We want to thinking, are my kids going to be safe on this campus? Are they going to be able to eat? Things like that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I
what
get it.
what
Yeah.
what can you give as a behind the curtain? How can we parents help ourselves during this process and help our kids at the same time? And again, I'm looking at this from, my son wants to go play hockey. Now it's not going to be D1, but what can we do during that process, Taj, to help our kids out and again help other parents out?
That's a great question, Tommy. And I love answering these types of questions because, obviously I got to see the recruiting process. And just for some context, when I was going through the recruiting process, my family and I, like my parents and I, we had absolutely no idea what we were doing. It was just kind of a whirlwind. We were excited that someone was willing to pay for me to go to college.
Where do we sign? Where do we sign?
Exactly. So that was like kind of the extent of the knowledge we had about it. Was we had never seen anything like this before. I mean, I had a cousin. He was 5 years older than me. He played football at Cal, but he was he's 5 years older. So by the time he was in college and by the time he had graduated college, I had never really seen it. But to answer your question, my advice that I would give to parents going and obviously the athletes going through this recruiting process is to really try to think long term and to understand that this is a process that you're being sold during. And I don't mean like, oh, they're trying to sell you, look at it with like a skeptical eye or be cynical about it. What I'm saying is just understand that some of the things that are being presented to you, or even the way the coaches may be interacting with you during the process, is not necessarily going to be the same way that it's going to be when you get there. So I think just to do your own research is something that I would recommend into, for example, looking into, do they actually have the major that you want to get into? And we could probably do a whole nother episode on whether or not at 18 you should be able to decide what you want to do with the rest of your life. But I
Well,
mean,
we could also do, uh, and I'll get myself into trouble. I've already told my son. I said, if you don't want to go to college, that's fine. I mean, there's so many different ways you can get educated that you don't have to go. But that's, again, Taj, that's another episode for you and I to cover. How's that?
yeah, I'd love to do that episode with you too, because I mean, here you are doing a podcast, and you chase it, like doing something that you're passionate about, and you can't. It's not like you went to school to do what you're doing now. You're doing it because it's something you enjoy doing and it's important to you. So it would be kind of hypocritical for you to be like, "Go to school, son."
I will stop you there. I did go. I went to school in Chicago, Columbia College, which is a arts college, and I did go there for uh, broadcasting. I didn't graduate, but I went through.
That's great.
So
Love
sorry,
it.
sorry to ruin your point there, but just to piggyback on that, I did when after I did leave college, I did look for on the job training. So I did go and spend my time in small markets to build up. And so Anyway, back to you, Taj, in the booth, as they would say.
In the booth. Yeah, I think just to kind of wrap up some of the advice, I would definitely say just understand that you're going through the process of being sold. I mean, like I had coaches coming over the house for dinner, coaches calling me after practice, all this type of stuff that you need to be aware of. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to go to those schools until you have an official offer on the table. So, just some general advice I would say is kind of enjoy the process. Obviously, like it's an exciting time in your life, and at the same time, really be aware of what's going on and don't get too caught up in the hype of everything. Make sure you're making smart, informed decisions about where you're going to go, asking tons of questions, like as many questions as possible about everything. What is a typical day in the life of a student athlete in this program going to look like? If I want to take this major, are these classes going to be available to me? Are these classes going to interfere with the practice schedule? That's something I see that I think is important to bring awareness to is that certain, especially with the sport like football, which is so time consuming, certain majors they will flat out tell you you can't take this major because it interferes with the practice schedule. Like the classes are during
Right.
practice hours. So if you have a certain major in mind, um, then I would definitely, put your foot down on that type of thing. Like I said, I was just happy to be there and happy to get my education paid for. So when they told me I couldn't take certain classes, I just kind of rolled with it. Like, I'm getting my degree for free. I'll be fine. If I could go back, and obviously hindsight is 2020, but if I could go back, I would be like, no, this is actually the major that I want. So if I'm late to practice a few days, we're gonna have to figure that out, or I'm gonna have to talk to somebody about this. You know what I mean? So
Did you at least get room and board?
yes, yeah, it was a full scholarship. That was all taken care of. So
Okay. Okay.
um, yeah, I think and there's a lot of times where the room and board, of course, there's a meal plan and all that too. Um, and it's like depending on the school's budget, obviously, it's not necessarily unlimited. There were many times where I ran out of meal points. And you gotta borrow a teammate's meal points or kind of ask mom and dad if they can send some money over. So it's still
Quickly.
quickly, right? I'm hungry. My stomach is
Yeah.
growling. You could probably hear me on the phone. So yeah, that's just some general advice I would give.
Yeah, I remember when I went away to this small school in Minnesota, and I really think that after again, like you said, Taj, hindsight is 2020. If I really had thought about life, I never would have gone to college. But I, part of me was glad because it did help me somewhat grow up. It did help me with uh, like you're saying, if you didn't have any money for food, what were you going to do? What were your options? How were you make that happen? And so that was something that again I'm happy I went, but looking back, I was never good in school, so I think I should have just gone a totally different route. One thing you're talking about started resonating. Unfortunately, it deals with the world of Hollywood, and I'm sure you're familiar with the movie The Blind Side.
Hmm. Right.
And when Michael Orr was going through that, and again, I know it's Hollywood, but when he was going through the recruiting process, and you had all those major schools and the major coaches showing up, it's not really realistically like that. And not to really compare and contrast Michael Orr with what your college career. So uh, what was something that you learned, a life lesson you learned during that recruiting process that you still have with you today?
That's a great question. And actually, I never thought about this before, Tommy, but the example of the blind side is actually, like you said, it's Hollywood, but that's actually a really good example. Obviously, I wasn't as highly recruited as a guy like Michael Orr coming out of high school, but at the same time, that movie is a pretty accurate depiction of what the recruiting process is like, even on a smaller scale, you know? And I think one thing, hmm, it kind of ties back into what I said earlier about being informed, more informed about the process and not just being excited to be there. I think I would have taken more, I guess agency would be the right word, and have more, I don't know, just taking more, kind of done more looking under the hood. Not that I regret going to Stony Brook. I think it was a great decision. I love, I had a great experience once I got over the culture shock. It was a great experience, great experience for me. And, um, but I think the process, I was a little bit stressed out and overwhelmed at the time because, I come home from practice, and this is high school. You're coming home from practice, and then you're on the phone with coaches, and you still have to do homework. And, there's coaches pulling you out of class while you're at school. And it's just kind of, a lot of can be overwhelming because you're like, all this is going on. Um, and I have to make a decision that I'm going to have to, I can't take it back. Once you sign that letter of intent, you can't take it back. So that's kind of a long roundabout way to answer your question and say I think that I would have been a lot more educated. Like, for example, I would have reached out to my cousin who, is 5 years older than me and went through the process at Cal. And I think I would have talked to him and kind of picked his brain a little bit and get some advice on him about how to maneuver through these certain things that I was going through. Like, I have cousins right now who I try to talk to as much as possible, because they're going through the recruiting process, coming out of high school, and I try to keep in touch with them and kind of be that, that sounding board for them, or just give them some words of wisdom. So, yeah, awareness. I think it comes down to awareness for the players and the parents.
Um, and I'm gonna just mention this to you, Taj, and anybody listening. There's a good chance you're gonna hear possibly a bunch of senior high school girls doing something because it's supposed to be social. Uh, what do you call it? Social
Distancing.
thank you, distancing. However, and this is why I'm happier on this episode. They're all working out together right now in our basement, and so my bonus daughter Becca said, "Hey, the girls are coming over." I'm like, "Hey, great! I'm recording." So if anybody hears any girls doing exercise, screaming, or whatever, that's what's going on in the house.
It's probably good you clear that up because
Yeah,
people's imaginations might be wondering, like, what does Tommy have going on at his house right now?
exactly. Hey, speaking of parents, so how can we parents? So I'm gonna try and be in your parents' shoes as far as when you were getting ready to go to the East Coast to go play football, go get your education. But how can we parents support not only our kids' dreams, but at the same time not not crushing them? So, for example, you know I mean, when I was growing up in Chicago, my dream was to be the starting catcher for the Chicago Cubs. Later, did I realize I couldn't hit a fastball to save my life. Um, so, how can we support our kids, especially as they're getting older, especially at the high school level, where they see these professional athletes, they see the money being made and the bling and the clothing and the cars, and they're like, I want that. But realistically, they can't make a jump shot to save their life. Or um, in the world of hockey, they can't skate, something like that. How can we parents support our kids and their dreams as they start progressing out of high school and looking at at their own big picture?
I think it's important as far as support. I think what's most important is reaffirming that you're there. Like, not trying to persuade them to go in any typical, like, any type of direction, as in, like, oh, you should stop pursuing this because you're never going to make it. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
obviously you don't want to be that blunt. I don't know anybody who would really do that. I mean, unfortunately, there are some parents out there who would be that blunt. um, but I think it comes down to just letting them know that you are in their corner and you do support whatever it is that they want to do. And I think what it is, Tommy, and you probably know this in all the work you do, that sometimes it just takes having, like, an adult conversation, like, especially if we're talking about being a teenager, just to kind of, I don't want to use the word plan B, but if we're talking about athletes who may not have a chance to either play collegiately or play professionally, then just having a conversation about maybe the statistics, like there's only a certain amount of players who make it to that level. You know, it's only right, only 2% of collegiate athletes make it to play professionally. So you have that other 98%.
Right.
And then even the 2% who make it to the professional level, their career could be, 3 years maximum. And that's in any league, not just football. We're talking about, there's the players that you never hear about, or the players who get cut during camp or have a career ending injury. So it really boils down to way less than 2%. But just, I want to make sure I'm answering your question properly. So are you asking, like, are we talking about high school athletes who are getting ready to go to college, or what kind of conversations are you talking about having?
Well, actually, just when our kids are saying, "Well, I want to be a professional athlete. I want to be, the next whoever." But again, you know, not to crush, our kids' dreams because, let's say, you know, I'll take basketball for example. You have to have the height, and if your kid, I mean, yeah, there was Muggsy Bogues, but um, if they don't have that, I don't want to say to a kid, hey, I know you want to play in the NBA, but let's be realistic. And, maybe this goes back to your point of having those adult conversations. Maybe that's what it is without really crushing their dreams, but letting them know you're going to support them. But at the same time, you got to be realistic.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what it comes down to, is just having those adult conversations and letting them know. Like, you can even laugh about it. It doesn't have to be this serious thing where it's like, look, you got to understand the percentages. You're probably not going to make it. You can even, I think, like, one thing that I love about you, especially since we connected and I started listening to your podcast, is there's a lot of self-deprecation, right? You put yourself down in like almost constantly at every episode, but it's hilarious, right?
Thank you.
So you're welcome. It's kind of like you can have those conversations with your kid as a parent, almost like, I mean, look at me, you know.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be a smart way to do it. I think I would, when I look back at my folks, those were kind of, some of the things my parents always kind of did the same sort of thing when they were talking to me, and it made me feel like it wasn't as much of a personal attack on me, but more so like, they're kind of talking about themselves as well. Like, you got my genetics, so
Yeah.
it is what it is. Um, yeah, I think
I'm happy you said that, and I just want to stop you there because
mhm.
of the genetics thing. And my poor son Connor. I mean, I am going to be biased because number one, I'm his dad. Number two, I used to coach him, and I see he's got the skills to really be a really really good hockey goalie. But unfortunately, he and we've had the discussion. He just doesn't have the height. And so that's why I wanted an expert such as you, Taj. I don't want to crush his dreams. I don't want to be, the dream crusher. I don't want to be his negative Nelly. I want him to thrive, but at the same time, it's like, dude, if you're lucky, you're going to maybe be 5'9". If you're lucky, average professional goalie is probably 6'5", 6'6". So I like how you're framing it of you got my genetics. You're not really going to be able to be that professional athlete you want to be. However, maybe there's a spot for you as a water boy. I don't know. Maybe that is crushing his
That's
dreams right
tough. The water. I was with you until the water boy thing. The water boy thing might be a little bit too much. That might be one of those things where he just storms out the room and slams his door after that one. But I think
there. That wouldn't be the first time.
I think while you were talking, Tommy, something actually popped into my head. So, in addition to kind of I guess the self-deprecation. And I'm not a parent, so I'm really just trying to put myself in the shoes
I'll
of.
tell you a kid or two.
I'm good. I'm gonna hold off for a little bit.
Okay. All right.
I appreciate it though. But I think it's also important to remind them that, okay, number one, of course, I'm going to support you on your dream to being a professional athlete. You have my, you know, my unconditional support and love throughout this process of trying to make it. Like, I got your back. I'm in your corner as your parent. And at the same time, I want you to know that it's okay if you don't make it, if it doesn't work out, because it's not like, it's not like I'm going to love you any less. It's not like you don't, it's not like you're less valuable as a human being because you didn't make it professionally. If anything, especially with what I'm doing now, working with former athletes and retired athletes, I think it's important to start early to just instill in like the younger generation that sports is a tool, right? It's like a personal development tool because yeah, you're competing against other teams and you're learning how to work in a team, work with others. You're competing against other people, but the most important thing that you get from sports is that you're competing with yourself. So like no matter what sport you play, no matter how far you make it, whether your career ends in high school, you play collegiately or you play professionally, it's still a tool that you can use throughout the rest of your life. So I think just kind of sharing with your kids that it's okay if they don't make it, like, and having them understand that it's okay, not just with you, but getting them to understand that it should be okay for them too if they don't make it, and then letting them know that whatever they get through this experience, no matter how long their career lasts, they're going to be able to use that experience for the rest of their life. Like, one thing I say with my former athletes, or I say to anybody I'm working with, is, okay, so you played for X amount of years, your career was this long, and you had game day like once a week or so on average, a couple times a week if you played a different sport. But on average, game day was once a week. Whereas, okay, you're no longer wearing the jersey. You're trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. But now every single day when you wake up is game day, and you're competing with that person in the mirror, and you have all the tools that you learned through playing your sport. So that was just on my mind while you were sharing. I think that would be important to share with your kids too.
Uh, I don't know how you're doing this. You must be. I don't have much of a mind, but you must be reading what's left, because the next question I really want to ask you, and you started going down that path, so this is going to be a beautiful transition. Is so with what's going on in the world right now and social distancing, a lot of schools are closed, and because of that, they've had to switch their education to online learning, video conferencing learning, but at the same time, this their sports are gone, and how it's rough. So, and we're going to get into your work, and I think this might be a good segue into your work. How can we help our young athletes right now who don't have a sport because of what has transpired in the world?
Right. I think first of all, these are like obviously crazy times. We've never seen anything like this before, and of course, it's dramatically impacting athletes all over the place. Not, of course, high school athletes, but collegiate athletes. With spring sports who had their seasons canceled. It's been like a crazy past few weeks or so, and I'm having a lot of these conversations. I predominantly work with collegiate athletes after they graduate, but I've been having a lot of conversations with those athletes, and it's been rough. Obviously because I mean they're never going to play again, even if they extend the eligibility for collegiate athletes, which is a complicated process in itself. You're still not guaranteed that scholarship spot or anything like that. And a lot of people, to be honest with you, Tommy, at least at the collegiate level, they're ready to move on. They're just like, this sucks. I can't believe this happened, but I'm not going to stay in college for another year. Like, I'm on track to graduate. I'm ready to kind of get my life started. Um, Sorry, I went off on a tangent, but back to you.
Good, you're good.
Um,
Welcome to the podcast, because I do too. As the train keeps going, sometimes I just go off the tracks.
yes, sir. Yep, that's why I knew we were gonna have a good conversation. So at least we're on the same page.
Yep.
But back to what you initially asked me. I think for high school athletes who they don't get to play the rest of their season, they don't get to have a proper graduation in May or whatever that looks like. Um, I'll just stick specifically to sports because that's my expertise. But to the parents, I would say I think it really starts with understanding what's going on, right? Even at the high school level, um, they've spent, I'm assuming they've spent 4 years playing with their teammates who are now their best friends, and they love to play whatever sport they're playing. And to understand that what they're going through is not just, oh, I can't, play with my ball anymore, or oh, I can't see my friends, or oh, I miss, playing games. It's a lot deeper than that. It's actually, it could be even at the high school level, a loss of identity. And I often equate it to almost like a death. It's like, a loss of self. It's almost like kind of having, like when I stopped playing football, I felt like a part of me had died. And I know that sounds dramatic, but I felt like this part of myself that I had known myself to be, and that other people had seen me as for, 10, what was it, 12, 13 years of my life, was now gone. And I didn't know who I was without that. So even at the high school level, athletes can go through the same thing. And I think it's important for parents of these high school athletes to understand that, not necessarily for all of them, but some of these athletes are going through some pretty traumatic stuff right now. And they may not necessarily want to open up and talk about it right away. A lot of times it's also because they don't necessarily understand what they're experiencing. They just know they wish they could get back on the field or on the court or whatever, with their friends, with their teammates. But what they're also experiencing is a loss of identity and a loss of self. So through using some of this kind of language, I'm hoping that any parents listening can maybe, take the words I said, like loss of identity, loss of self. It's almost like, part of you has died or whatever, something like that, and maybe be able to kind of relate to their kids in that way by using that language. But I also think it's important to not, don't try to force it. I think in every, parent and child dynamic is different. But one thing I always appreciated about my folks, and for me, the loss of self was when I came home from college, and I was done playing football. I didn't know who I was outside of the pads. But one great thing that my parents did was not try to force it, but almost like, hey, we see that you're obviously going through something right now. And we want you to know that when you're ready to talk about it, or if you just need a hug or some kind of support, we're here for you. So yeah, that I lost what I was, the train ran away again, Tommy, but that's what I wanted to say to the
That's
parents out
okay.
there.
Now, but nowadays, no hugging, no hugging. 6 feet distance.
That's true. I forgot about that, man. Exactly. Maybe a hug from across the room.
There you go. I'll hug you, Taj, but it's going to have to be virtually right now.
Yeah, I'm giving you a virtual hug back right now too, Tommy. We need
So
that.
the name of your business is Thrive After Sports.
Yes, sir.
What inspired you? What happened after college? Because I'm very wanting to hear your story, because I think this is going to be very important to, not just. Uh, I think this is really going to be important to parents, because it was like you were saying, that was your identity. You were a football player. That was your identity. It didn't matter your name was Taj Dashaun. You were a football player.
Mm-hmm.
So Thrive After Sports. What were the steps to get you creating this business?
Yeah. So, well, I'll tell you where the name Thrive After Sports came from first, because I think that'll kind of lead into how it all came together. Um, like I said, when I came back home from college, I was really struggling because, and I knew I wasn't going to the NFL. I didn't have the best college career, and that I won't get into all that. But there's a lot of factors in that. I didn't have the great college career that I thought I was going to have. So the NFL, especially by the time my junior and senior year came around, I was like, okay, NFL is definitely not happening. I'll graduate. I'll come back home. I got this degree. I'm in a good spot in life. The world is my oyster right now. But that wasn't really the case, because I came back home and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what my interests were outside of football. I didn't see myself like kind of just working the typical 9 to 5 and going to sit in the cubicle all day. That the thought of doing that kind of drove me crazy. I spent the last 13 years of my life playing football. So to imagine going in and wearing a suit and tie and sitting in a cubicle all day, like that scared me, to be honest. I was like, I don't know if I want to do that, you know. Um, so here I am back home in my childhood bedroom, no idea what I want to do with my life, no experience, which is something that I don't think is talked about enough. Yeah, you get your education paid for, but if all your time is consumed by the sport, you're coming out of college with a blank resume. And not everybody's going to be super impressed that, you know, you were a star athlete. They want to know, like, what does it have to do with this job? Why should I pay you? you know?
Right.
So anyway, it was a very, very troubling time for me. And I'll kind of tie it into the name, but Thrive After Sports came from when people used to ask me how I was doing there in that time. I would say, man, I'm just surviving. And I really felt like I was in survival mode because all I was trying to do was just get enough money to move out of my parents' house so I can feel independent again, you know, take care of myself, pay my own bills and all that, have my own spot, my own apartment and everything like I did when I was in college. And so I used to say, you know, I'm just surviving, man. I'm just in survival mode right now. And then eventually, and I'll kind of dive into the full story, but as I started to learn more about myself, have some, I guess, financial success, kind of, you know, success career wise, I said, all right, I'm not going to say I'm surviving anymore. I'm going to go from surviving to thriving. So I said, I want to thrive. I don't just want to survive through the rest of my life. I want to thrive. I want to live a full, thriving life. And so when I started Thrive After Sports, it was only natural. When I started working with athletes, it was only natural for me to call my program Thrive After Sports. Um, and so what actually led me here, I'll kind of give you the short version because I know we probably have a lot more stuff to talk about. But eventually I did get a job after moving back home. My first job was in sales because athletes, a lot of people tell athletes, hey, you should be a coach because, you know, like you can stick around the game, or you should be um, you should be in sales because you're competitive, you know, and you're a go getter. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'll get into sales so I can make a lot of money. But nobody ever tells you that you have to, in order for you to be good at anything you're selling, you have to actually be enthusiastic about the product and genuinely like it, or like be interested in that field. Um, you can't, like, at least in my experience, if you try to sell something you don't believe in, you're going to fall flat on your face because that comes across when you're trying to sell it to people. People are like, this guy's just trying to get some money. He doesn't really care about this product or about me. So that's where I was. I realized that sales wasn't for me, at least not in that respect. And I was like, I want to start helping people in some capacity. I don't know how, I don't know where I'm going to do it. But it's funny, Tommy, because realizing that I wanted to help people is what led me here. I just kept sticking with that. Whatever I do, I'm going to help people. So a natural step from sales was recruiting. I got into recruiting, started helping people land jobs. I love that. My favorite part was not getting the commission check when I helped somebody land a job. It was like, this person's happy that, you know, they can eat now. They can keep their lights on because I helped them.
Right. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that was extremely rewarding. And then I got it. My next job after that, I was working in career services. So basically still recruiting, but career services at the Art Institute in Hollywood, California. And I was helping like young creative students kind of land jobs out in the LA area. And they were into like fashion, culinary, just really cool stuff, really interesting, creative, young creative folks. And I enjoyed that job too, because once again, I was helping people. I did so well at that job in terms of placement numbers that I got recruited for a job in San Diego County where I was working with low income families and refugees, because San Diego is, or at least was at the time, a sanctuary city for Syrian refugees. So I was helping
Yep.
Syrian
Yep.
refugees and, right, I was helping them find jobs. Syrian refugees and like families on welfare, kind of helping them break the cycle of, you know, poverty. And so around that time, I was also working with kind of guys who graduated after me, or kind of helping out guys who, you know, I might have grown up with playing. And I was kind of helping them navigate their lives now that they were done with sports. So I would go to my job and then I would come home and then I would be on these phone calls with former athletes. And it got to the point where like even people I knew would be like, hey, can you talk to my cousin? So I'm on the phone with people I've never met before. Like, hey, I just heard you graduated from, you know, this school. What are you doing now? Like, what are you up to? What kind of things are you experiencing? Like, are you feeling depressed right now? Or, you know, what kind of jobs are you looking for? What's going on in your life? And having these like heart to heart conversations. And one day the light bulb went off because, like I said, Tommy, I really didn't want to be the guy sitting in the cubicle for the rest of my life. And even though I was helping people through the job that I was working at in San Diego County at the time, it still was not, I was like, man, I'm really getting tired of going to this office. And I feel like I can help people in a bigger capacity if I wasn't limited to, whatever corporate structure, excuse me, whatever. I need some water. I'm over here. I feel like I was limited by the corporate structure. So I was like, man, this is kind of like the perfect idea for me to start working strictly with former athletes. So I just jumped ship like an idiot, instead of being like, once I have enough money, I was just like, I kind of like left that job a week later and then just dove in. And I moved back in with my parents. And I'm fortunate enough, obviously, in case you couldn't tell by now, I have great parents. So they were,
Mom, Dad, I'm home. Holy crap! What?
yeah, they were. Don't get me wrong; they had their doubts, and I still had to get a part-time job. They didn't want me just waking up every day and trying to build this dream, this vision that I had. They believed in me enough to let me move back home to pursue it, but not like, hey, you got to make sure you got some money coming in too. So I got a part-time job, and I was working on the business, and it's since then I've been at it. So I actually have been working with athletes for around, it's coming up on 3 years, but it's really about 2 years since I like jumped in full steam and actually really started pursuing it, developed a curriculum, started taking it seriously. Um, and yeah, since then it's just I've been, and I'm happy to get into like how the program works and all that if you want to, but that's kind of what led me up to building and creating Thrive After Sports.
Well, two things come to mind. The first thing out of your LinkedIn profile, I love this sentence, and it says, "After several years of stumbling around in the dark, I began to take my eyes off myself and focus on serving others." I think that's Taj. I think that's beautiful
Thank you.
because I think that's where your pivot, as the new word of the day is, once you saw that, and I'm just generalizing here, but once you saw that it, and I know you said this before, it wasn't always about the money, but once you've really believed in helping other people, that's when things started to change.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yep. The other thing too is because as somebody who's battled majority of their life of depression, because you talk about that in your LinkedIn profile. What was that, or go through? Can you go through that, and how did you recognize that you were going through depression, and how did you eventually? I don't know if you did or didn't, but how did you get out of that?
Yeah, I think um, I've had several battles with that, just like you. It was obviously when I first came back home from college, that was the first part of it. And then the second time happened once I actually started. This was around the time where I first kind of started working at the Art Institute in career services. I was, in my career, making decent money, helping people, but it kind of came back again because I was like, that void came up that I was talking about, where it's like, yeah, I'm doing what I set out to do, but the money is not enough. And even though I wanted to help people, I'm not helping people to the degree that I feel like I'm capable of. Or maybe, in hindsight, it's that I wasn't necessarily helping the right group of people, right? Because helping athletes is like near and dear to my heart, obviously, because that's something that I have been through myself. So what got me through it was really leaning into that. And exactly like that first sentence you read off my LinkedIn profile is took my focus off of myself. And ironically, that's led to the most opportunities and, um, success and things like that, because I wasn't looking at me. I was focused on contributing to others in some capacity. On top of that, really just doing the work on myself consistently. Obviously the self improvement. Um, I've taken a lot of. Have you ever heard of Landmark Forum?
Um, years ago.
Okay, yeah, it's basically like a personal development program that I took. My girlfriend actually invited me to go. She had done it and had a huge transformation in her life, and so I'm like, oh sure. I mean, if it worked for you, and obviously I see a difference, I'll go check it out. So I went there, and got a lot of, it's almost like group therapy in a sense. And I had always kind of shied away from therapy and stuff like that. But to answer your question, what got me through, number one, is, and not that I still don't have my bouts with it from time to time, today, but I always remind myself that if I'm feeling down on myself, it just means that I'm really not playing a big enough game. And I need to like take my eyes off of myself and start looking at how I can contribute to other people. So that's the first part. Contributing to other people got me through. And then I'd say the second thing, or maybe the first thing, I don't think one is more important than the other, but really doing the work on myself all the time, like looking at the ugly parts of myself that I need to face and overcome, and really trying to, chip away at those things and operate from my highest self at all times, if that makes sense.
What are those ugly?
Um, it's tough to say. I think the ugly parts of myself, I'll just talk about recently because there's been many over the years, obviously, but ugly parts of myself in terms of self doubt, or fear, or imposter syndrome. Like I have the vision that I had for what I wanted to create, which is working with athletes, is in full effect. I'm actually doing the vision that I had for myself when I was, sitting in that cubicle and thinking like, I'm going to quit my job and just do this. And it took a while to get here, but I still have a little bit of imposter syndrome from time to time. Like, I'm only 28. Like, who am I to be operating a business, or who am I to be, you know, on a podcast right now getting interviewed about my life story? Things like that I think pop up. It's really all internal. It's just kind of, um, yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot of them if I really looked, but I have them under control. The demons I keep the demons at bay, and they're under control. And I do that by intentionally keeping them in check, and also helping other people so that I'm not sitting around thinking about myself all day, you know?
Well, you bring up a really good point, because since you are dealing with former athletes, even professional athletes, professional actors, actresses, um, they go through imposter syndrome because they're waiting for somebody to tap them on the shoulder and say, "Yeah, this has all been a joke. You're done. You're out of here." So I can see why it. In my opinion, it's like an osmosis. The people you're dealing with, a little bit is that it's funneling to you, going, hold on, who am I to try and help somebody else who was an athlete at this level? Who am I to be able to help them when somebody else should be doing it? So i I commend you on just the fact that you, when you recognize it, that you can um, do something about it in a positive way.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, you actually just brought up a good point. Something else that I forgot to bring up in terms of like the self doubt or the imposter syndrome. I had a lot of that at first. Like if let's say for example, like I played at Stony Brook, right? And I just told everybody, if you don't know about Stony Brook, that's a smaller tier D1 AA program. And here's this guy who maybe was a superstar basketball player or football player or something at Clemson, for example, right? A huge program that everybody, like a household name. I used to have that at the beginning where it's like, who am I to be working with this person? Or here's this guy who played in the NFL and I never even made it to a camp. Here's this guy who had like a 3-4 year career in the NFL and is now looking to figure out what's next. I had a lot of that imposter syndrome at first, but what helped me overcome that was just realizing that I'm the whole reason I started Thrive After Sports is to be the person that I needed in my corner when I was going through that process, that transition, that loss of identity. And that loss of identity is the same no matter what level you're at. Like we just talked about high school for a little bit. Like I don't think, I mean, maybe it could be more severe because if you played in college or the pros, you had an additional 5, 6, 7 years on top of your high school experience. But that loss of identity, that loss of self, is the same at any level. So if I'm saying I want to be the guy to go back in time and help myself deal with those things, it's not about the level that you played at. It's about the experiences that I had and that I overcame internally. So if I can help someone do that, that helps me overcome the imposter syndrome too. Especially as I start to work with more athletes from bigger programs or professional players. So it's like, I know what I'm doing now. I have a lot more confidence than when I first started, you know.
What's a go-getter mindset in your opinion?
A go-getter mindset is someone who is a go-getter mindset is I'm not going to be stopped. Is like relentlessly pursuing whatever it is that you want to achieve. So I had a go-getter mindset about building Thrive After Sports. Like I knew that it was going to take some time. I knew that I was going to be broke for a long time. I mean, by no means am I a rich man today, you know, but I'm saying a go-getter mindset is like in the face of all adversity, you just keep going. It doesn't matter what it is. You set the plan, and that's what it starts with. It's not like, okay, I'm a go-getter, but you have no vision. It's creating the vision, um, having a clear picture of how you're going to get there, and then just executing day in and day out, regardless of what happens. You know, as corny as it sounds, one thing I always say is like the only way you can fail at something is if you quit, and we've all heard that before. But I think that's the mindset of a go-getter is like, you know, I'm not going to quit on this because then I failed. That's the only way I fail is if I quit. So,
Who in your view has a go-getter mindset right now?
I mean, a lot of people. Obviously me, you. I think you have a go-getter mindset because you made this
Huh?
podcast happen. You know, after after months of us going back and forth and not being able to coordinate, you kept like, you know, reaching out and making sure that it happened. So um, you know, I think any athlete, especially if you play at an elite level, any athlete, there's so many people. I know so many go-getters. It's hard to say. Are you asking?
But can a go-getter mindset, even though they're at a professional level, and maybe let's use football as an example with the 53 man roster. Um, and this is just me being me, but it seems that not every single one of those guys has a go-getter mindset. They are in a professional sport, and it might be a little bit of I'm here,
Mm-hmm.
I was good, and I'm going to stay here. But they don't necessarily will continue to put the work in because maybe they don't feel they have to because they've already reached that high level.
Right. Agreed. Yeah, I agree. I think the go-getter mindset is more so something that it's not like permanent. It's not like this person was born a go-getter and this person wasn't. I think it's something that anybody can apply. Like a school teacher can apply a go-getter mindset to like, I'm going to finish grading these papers. You know what I mean? Like all the teachers around the world right now who are doing Zoom calls with their students, like I'm sure it takes a go-getter mindset to keep those students on track and paying attention while they're hosting the Zoom calls. So the example you brought up is a great one. Like guys, for example, in the NFL who they're like, okay, I made it, or whatever. They're not concerned about being the top player or anything. They're just kind of there and maybe just coasting a little bit, collecting the check. Maybe they just don't have a go getter mindset about the sport anymore, and maybe later in life, or maybe they have a go getter mindset about other things currently, or maybe they'll have it later. I think it's more so something that can be applied, not necessarily something that you're born with. You know.
Can you break down a go-getter mindset? Like, what does it look
Um,
like? What does a go-getter mindset look like?
I think it looks like I think it comes down to a few things for me. Like the words that are going through my mind right now are clarity, vision, clarity, and execution. Like, so what does it look like? Let's see. I guess I hate to use I don't want to make it seem like I'm self centered, but so me using my go getter mindset today was I had 6 calls today with former athletes scheduled, right? And then I also had a bunch of work that I needed to do. So the go getter, and also I had this podcast scheduled with you. Like this is the last thing I'm doing today. After this podcast, I'm gonna have some dinner and then write out my goals for tomorrow. So the go getter mindset is me. Last night, I'm sitting there writing out. Okay, these are all the things I have to do today, and they're all scheduled. And this is what I'm going to do in between this call. I'm going to get this work done after this call. I have my podcast with Tommy in the evening, and this is what I'm going to do. And this is what I'm writing down. I'm going to plan the next day after that. And then the go getter mindset is simply like waking up and doing it. it's not because people write down goals all the time, but it doesn't mean that they're actually gonna do them. Like I woke up this morning. One of my things that I do is I put my running shoes next to the bed so that I have to walk by those shoes. I might as well put them on and go for a run.
Might as well, yeah.
Exactly. I'm gonna be feeling really guilty if I put those running shoes by there and I'm like, nah, I'm not gonna go for a run this morning. So I don't know if I answered your question. That's the best way I can break it down.
No, no,
Is through my
no.
own
I
experience.
think you touched on a point about people setting goals. I'm under the belief of one of my mentors is Brian Tracy, and Brian Tracy years ago talked about um, what people do is they create like a to-do list, and it becomes a to-don't list because they get overwhelmed. You know, I'm going to do this, and it's like 10 things, and then they're like, oh my gosh, it's way too many. And then a friend of mine, Chris, she said what she likes to do is HVAs, high value achievements. So instead of doing 10 things of not end up doing, you create these three HVAs a day. And what three things can I do today that are going to get me through my day versus I got 20 things to do. I've got to walk the dog, I got to clean the house, I got to exercise, I have to eat. It's like you get overwhelmed. And so if you just break it down to, all right, what is it I want to accomplish today in the time that I have today? I think that could be part of your go-getter mindset is if I say I'm going to do these three things, I'm going to make them happen.
Right. Right. Exactly. Long term or short term goals doesn't matter as long as you have something laid out in front of you and you're making a commitment to hold yourself accountable to make those things happen and you actually execute on those day in and day out. You're a go getter. You have a go getter mindset. Right. Even if you miss a day, that's okay. You didn't have the go getter mindset that day, but you can apply it again the next day whenever you want. It's always available to you.
Yeah, and don't beat yourself up over it. Oh my gosh, I wasn't able to do this one thing. My whole life is ruined.
Right. Yeah, I've been there. I've done that. I've beat myself up like that before too. But you know,
I do that every day when I walk by my running shoes.
that's hilarious. Hey, well, hopefully this conversation, Tommy. Hopefully us having this conversation will encourage you to put the running shoes on in the near future.
Oh, I did. I did go for a walk today, and I will let you know, Taj. As of right now, as of right now. It didn't update. Didn't update. But anyway, I have over 13,675 steps today.
Congratulations. You probably
Thank
took
you.
more steps than me today, and I went for a run. That sounds like a lot of steps.
I had to. I just had to get out of the house. I had to get out of the
I
house.
hear you.
Just I've got this. Long story short, I'm the dreaded day job has me grounded, so I'm super happy about that. So I get up early, and I write, and I do things. The Just another side note behind the curtain for everybody. A friend of mine and I are toying with another podcast. We put one episode out, and anyway, so I love being home, but that's one of the things I have to remind myself is get out of the house. And I did that today. It's a beautiful day here in northern Colorado. Um, there we go, Taj. The train went off the tracks again.
Hey, I'm
Um,
listening. I'm listening.
uh, I want to honor your time, but do you still have a little bit of
I
time?
do. Yeah, I'm good.
Awesome. Um, because of the way you've built your business, and I want to tie this into the way of the world right now. And one of the things that you do for Thrive after sports is you help former athletes with looking for work, building businesses. How can how can Thrive After Sports help the non-athlete right now, the the people that are going to be needing to look for work or wanting to build a business? What can what you've learned building your business, what can advice can you give to those people that say, you know what, I'm tired of working for the man or for the woman, I want to do my own thing?
I think the best advice I can give is to come up with a plan and don't think it's going to happen overnight. So if you're someone who is working a typical 9 to 5 and you're like, okay, I want to start a business, you got to like, I'd say honestly, minimum say this is going to take 5 years, and that's minimum, right? It might happen sooner, like it could very easily happen in 6 months or a year. But if you just go into this thing with the mindset that this might actually take me 5 years before I'm able to walk away from my job, like don't be an idiot like me, right? Like don't I wouldn't be here if I didn't make that move, but I wouldn't advise some of the things that I had to go through to anybody. I had to move back
Well,
in.
hold on, I'm gonna interrupt you.
Okay.
By the way, on this podcast, only me can do the self-deprecating humor. No, not the guests, because my guests are all brilliant people,
Got
such
you.
as yourself, Paige. So, um, but if you hadn't gone through, those life lessons, if you hadn't gone through, being an athlete in high school and then, doing the college tours and then ending up in New York going, oh my God, snow? I want to go
Right.
back to San Diego. which,
Exactly.
which I gotta tell you. All right, speaking of train off the tracks, my uncle went to school at Marquette University, which is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
Hmm.
and we all grew up in the burbs of Chicago. And he spent 2 years at Marquette, and then he transferred to USC, and he never looked back. So I'm amazed when people go from the West Coast to the East Coast, and I'm going, why? It's it's beautiful on the West Coast. It's gorgeous over there. Anyway, I digress. But again, if you hadn't taken those twists, turns, roadblocks, what have you, you would have ended up where you are today, possibly.
That's very true, and I do agree with that. And I think when I'm giving advice to people, I do try to, like I said, not be I don't want to be self-deprecating again, out of respect for the other guests that you've had on your podcast. But I think I try to, like anybody I'm working with, right? I try to advise them if they do want to start a business, and we're kind of starting to talk about what that's going to look like and how we're going to do it, or I'm connecting them with people who can, be other mentors to them throughout that process. I definitely try to advise them to do it the smart way, to have some income coming in while you're building on the side. When you get home from work early in the morning, on the weekends, definitely got to sacrifice weekends. There's no more going to the movies or hanging out at the bar. Like if you're trying to build something, you got to be serious about trying to build it. It's not going to build itself. Um, at the same time, excuse me. At the same time, I don't think everybody's built for what I had to go through. Like I had a guy right now. I'm coaching him on how to build a business, or this specific type of business he wants to. I actually need to. Excuse me. Train went off the tracks, Tommy. I actually need to connect you two down the line because he wants to help um, educate, ironically enough, high school athletes about the process of getting recruited and kind of like the do's and don'ts because he had such a rough recruiting process. So he's starting a podcast around it and launching the website. But I'll connect you guys when all that happens. Um,
Perfect.
but anyway, this particular guy, right? Um, I was advising him to build on the side, but he quit his job. He just like couldn't take it anymore and left. So now he's going through a little bit of a situation, trying to figure out income. And but I think what it does is it kind of makes you desperate to start getting income from the business. And I think that's kind of scary at the beginning because you're just building it, especially if it's something that you're doing. Like you have a vision for something that you want to see in the world. It put me in a tough spot because it's like I'm doing this because I want to help people, but like I'm living back home with my folks. My car just got repossessed because I quit my job too soon. It's like I don't think I would want to go through that again. But at the same time, like you said, it brought me here. So, even though the guy I'm working with, I advised him to have some part-time income coming in and he quit his job. It's like, who knows? Maybe he's built for it. And so far he's still putting the work in and making things happen. So it seems like he is, you know. Um, but yeah, I think just to kind of take it back to your question, advice to non-athletes or just people in general who are tired of whatever they're doing day to day and they want to start something, it takes a lot of reflection to figure out what you want to do. That's the most important thing. You don't want to be like, I'm going to do this because it's a quick way to get rich and I can make a whole bunch of money and leave my job. I don't think anyone, it may seem like a good idea at first, but in order for you to build something, you're going to have to put a consistent amount of work in. And if it's like, I can't stress this enough, if you're just doing something for money, that's enough to get you started, but it's not enough to keep you going when things get tough, you know? Because a lot of people, once they don't see results right away, especially financial results, they just drop off, they quit. You and I both know how many like podcasts are out there where people started and then they just stopped. No more episodes one day because I don't know, they thought after like 17 episodes they were going to be getting sponsors and stuff. I don't know.
Right.
So we see it every day. I have a lot of podcasts that I used to listen to that I really enjoy, and then they just stop dropping episodes all of a sudden. And you're like, I see what happened there. They were looking for, quick results. But whatever it is that you do, my advice is to spend a lot of time thinking about what are you willing to spend a lot. Like, what would you, it's the old kind of cliche advice, like, what would you do for free? Right. But I like to flip it to say, like, what are you willing to do and put a whole bunch of work in for potentially years and still be broke at, just to like, still not be making a lot of money doing this thing, but you still enjoy the process of doing it. So spend a lot of time reflecting, even journaling, or here's some good advice. I always ask people, you ask the like three closest people in your circle and you ask them, what are my strengths? And you want to write this stuff down too, write down their answers. You ask them, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And don't let people off the hook with weaknesses either. You got to make sure that when you ask someone close to you, tell them that you need some weaknesses so you can be aware of these things. Don't let them say, oh, you're fine, you're perfect. Especially if you ask your mom or somebody like that.
Oh no, my mom would too. No, no, no.
She would let you have it, Tommy. Your mom
Oh
would let you
yeah,
have it.
my mom still lets me have it.
Mine too. That's good. It's necessary though. We need that. We
It
need that.
keeps us grounded.
Exactly. Yes, sir. So yeah, so strengths and weaknesses. And the last one is, how do you envision me making a contribution to the world? That's a deep
Ooh,
question.
I like that.
Right. So you'd be surprised, especially if you want to ask at least like three people closest to you. If you ask them those three questions, especially the last one, how do you envision me making a contribution to the world? And you write down all their answers, that gives you feedback, like immediate feedback from the people in your environment. Because these are the people who know you best. And they're telling you directly, like, hey, these are the ways that I see you making a contribution. And you can use their insight and kind of your own, self-reflection, self-discovery to look at how you can use that to make a business. Because you and I both know, Tommy, like all a business is solving a problem for somebody. So if you can get feedback about how you can make a contribution in a way that you enjoy doing, whether it's independent or you're assembling a team of people to do this, then I think that's a really good place to start.
What is your strength? What is your weakness? And what is the envision uh, to the world? What can you bring to the world? I love that. And I agree, because the whole weakness thing I hate, just because it's so old fashioned when it comes to the world of job interviewing, and when in as of late when I hear that question, I just look at them and I go, I'm not here to work on my weaknesses. I'm here to work on my strengths, and that are. But
Whoa.
the way you
Mic
phrased it,
drop.
the, pardon?
I said mic drop. That was a great one.
Oh,
I've had
oh yeah,
That's a great response because I've had so many people ask me that question in interviews. Like, what do you consider your weaknesses? And I hate that question too. It's like,
yeah.
wow, that's a great response though. I'm not here to work on my weaknesses. I wish I would have
I'm
said
not
that to
here to work on
somebody.
my weaknesses. Exactly. However, but the way the when you talk about it, when you talk about your close friends, and again, um, oh gosh, I'm going to screw up the quote that Jim Rohn always talked about. You are the you are the one person of your five people, and I'll put the actual quote in the show notes. But it also goes to if you're the smartest person in your circle, you need a bigger circle.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like the way you do that because you get people on their high horse thinking they're the world's greatest gift to whatever. But when you present it to them, going, well, tell me your strengths, and you hear what from your friends, from your close friends, what you're good at, but at the same time, I think that's that's great marriage counseling right there too.
Mm. Wow, I never
I
thought
mean,
about it like that before in terms of wow, because yeah, it's a partnership. So you're like asking these questions
exactly.
for the sake of the partnership to get feedback. That's huge.
Well, I heard this years ago from Darren Hardy, who used to be the editor in chief of Success Magazine, and he talked about how he was at some some event, and the speaker said, when you're in a marriage or in a relationship, what is the percentage that each person should be doing to maintain that relationship? And of course, the old standard is 50-50.
Hmm.
However, in a relationship, it's 100-100 because you want both people invested in that relationship.
That's right. That's awesome. I love that.
I love what your strength, weaknesses, and vision to the world. That again, I'm just thinking, coming from you know working with other dads, this is something I can borrow from you and say, sit down with your significant other, ask them these questions, and get honest feedback. And that's the thing too, is you have to have the honest feedback.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's important. That's why I recommend doing it for the people that you're closest to. And it's great because and I really do like hone in on the weaknesses too. Of course, the most important question is the last one. The how do you envision me making a contribution? But like you said, the weaknesses part is really important too because it's not like, when we're in a job interview and they're asking us, like you said, what are your weaknesses? And you're not here to work on your weaknesses. In this case, when you're asking someone close to you, it's not necessarily that you're asking that question because you are trying to work on your weaknesses, but it's important for you to have these things on your radar. And if you want to work on them, I mean, you have the freedom to do that because, like, a lot of times, some of those weaknesses could be the things that are holding you back from making the contribution that people might, the feedback that they might give you from the third question. Like, the way that you could make a contribution, some of your weaknesses could be stopping you from doing that, you know? One of the things that like when I asked my mom that question, and this was I had already started Thrive After Sports at the time, but one of her answers for weaknesses was not communicating enough, right? Like because sometimes I kind of go into I don't call people. I just kind of go into work mode, and I'm out of communication a lot. I'm just kind of grinding. I'm on the phone with somebody working or I'm putting in work. But when she said that, it triggered something with me like, okay, I need to start reaching out to more people in my life. And I also need to start reaching out to the world more. And that actually it made me start a podcast. It made me start putting out, videos and content and articles. And it's like, oh yeah, I can still help people and make a contribution, even if they're not in my program or I'm not working with them one on one. So the weaknesses question is important too. I just wanted to hone in on that because you want to make sure that your weaknesses aren't keeping you back from making the contribution that you're here to make in this life.
Well, you're talking about the video. I mean, that's how I found you, was somebody had shared one of your videos. I'm like, and I wish I had written it down, Taj, which specific video you did, because it really talked to me, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I got to get this guy on the podcast because again, whatever it was just beautiful and brilliant. But then again, all your videos and content are beautiful and brilliant.
Thank you, Tommy. I appreciate that. You're trying to make me blush right now. What's going
I
on?
am.
Well,
Well,
it worked. It worked. Thank you. But yeah, I have it, and it's cool though because like, for example, me putting out, and thank you for your compliments. I really do mean that. All jokes aside, but the fact that I'm putting out the information, like you said, leads to us connecting. And now I'm aware of your work and what you're doing, and you and I are connected, and who knows, like down the line where our relationship is going to lead to, what it could turn into as we both continue to like be on our missions. And now I have someone else who I'm acquainted with, and now I'm able to listen to another great podcast, by connecting with you. But it started with me putting something out, and that happened.
Exactly.
So it's important.
Well, and it somewhat goes along with the imposter syndrome, is that if you get so bogged down with imposter syndrome, you won't, as the great Jim Rohn would say, you won't share your gifts with the rest of the world because you're too scared. And I'm so grateful, and I am so grateful whoever shared that one video, and I saw that, and I'm like, I think you might have been talking about maybe young athletes or maybe high school athletes, but whatever it was, it was a perfect timing. And I was just like, I gotta get in touch with this guy. This guy knows his stuff. And so uh, I'm just grateful again, the timing. And as I've always, or not always, but ever since I met my wife, is my faith guru. There are no coincidences,
Mhm.
and so if you believe in a higher power or not, I do, and I just believe that God said, "Hey, Tommy, you should be on LinkedIn right now because there's this guy, Taj Dashaun, with Live After Sports. He's got a little video out there you gotta see." I'm like, "Oh, all right, whatever you say, man. Sure."
Yeah, I agree. I feel the same way. Nothing's by accident. You were meant to see the video. We were meant to connect, and after months of trying to coordinate schedules, we were meant to record today. So it's
We
great.
are. All right, so here's the last question. You ready?
Yes, sir. Ready.
All right. Um, what has changed in your life the past 12 months?
Wow, that's a great question. Okay, let me look back to 12 months ago. What has changed? I'm more. It's crazy because 12 months ago, I felt like I was doing a great job already of working on myself, being introspective. Um, but as I look back a year ago where I was, it's willing to, like, kind of like we talked about, looking at the ugly parts, and they're not necessarily ugly. It's just kind of like, things we all need to work on as people. Um, in the past 12 months, what's changed is that I've done a much better job of sharing more of myself. And I don't just mean online or through social media or whatever. I mean sharing more of myself with people around me. And that vulnerability, ironically enough, has led to other people, whether it's, family members, my girlfriend, just anybody around me, or clients, former athletes I'm working with. It's let my vulnerability has allowed them to be more vulnerable, which has allowed deeper transformations to take place, not just for them or the people around me, but for me as well. So to bring it full circle, that what's changed is me being able to take a deeper dive into myself and look at the parts of myself, look at the weaknesses, so to speak, and be able to improve upon those, um, so I can just be the best version of me for the people that I'm serving.
Beautiful, man. That was beautiful.
Thank you. That was a great question. That came out of left field too. You're good with these questions. They come out of nowhere.
Wait, please leave a rating and review. Whether it's good, bad, in between, this guy's got to know. Yes, he's not the best looking guy in the world, but man, is he sweet. He's got soft skin. He's nice to snuggle with. Oh, wait, I didn't say that, did I?
Hold on. Before you leave, please check out the show notes and find out more information about our guests from today's episode. And also, just a reminder that you can always schedule a one-on-one talk with me. Just go to my calendar, the bottom of the page of the show notes, and click on the link. TTFN.